Good evening, everyone. Norm Potter here, hosting Educational Norm. Background music tonight is provided by Steve Madewell, my brother-in-law, a great musician. If you get a chance and you're in Northeast Ohio, he plays out at many of the wineries and many of the other places, local bars. So if you're interested, Steve Madewell, Madewell Music. Thanks for letting me use the music, Steve. This is Homecoming, by the way. We'll finish that off later at the end here. Uh, Welcome tonight. We are talking about putting the I back in IEP. And I want to state up front that I am not a special education teacher. I am an administrator that has worked with special education teachers over the years, also had a fully inclusive classroom where we worked hand in hand with the special education department in many cases, and also had some aides in my classrooms when I was working in one of the districts. So my background in special ed is through teaching and also through the administrative role. But before we get started, I want to thank everybody for passing on my video from last week. By far the most viewed one I've had so far in my short amount of time of doing these things. I went from 9 viewers the previous week when we talked about writing across the curriculum to 200 viewers so far right now with the last one, which was about don't break your teachers. So I think we'll get into some more positive help for teachers here in the next segment next week. I want to make sure we still do some of these things where we're talking about curriculum pieces and what we can do to change school as much as we can to benefit our kids. I also want to give a shout out to the Tomcos. This talk tonight was actually based on an article I wrote way back when, and I ran into the Tomcos and they both said that they read the article. I think they may be the only ones to read the article. So I wanted to make sure that I talked to them and said thank you for supporting me way back when. So one of the things that I want to come across to let you know is that if you don't know the role of the special education teacher in the classroom, and you don't know the work you have that they do, I think that it's important that you realize the amount of work that goes into being a special education teacher. I know that you are dealing with some of the most difficult students to actually learn and grow because of what they have working against them. But almost every teacher that I've worked with that's in special ed has found a way to make those kids better and make them enjoy school and find ways to get them involved in classrooms that are obviously very important for their growth. And for all that hard work that they do, we reward them by giving them the most paperwork of any other teacher in the entire district or in the entire building. And that has been the case since day one. If you've never seen an IEP paperwork, it's crazy how much people have to fill out. And it's by law, and we have to follow that by law. So when you start looking at all the things that these teachers do in the classroom, what you don't see is that tip of the iceberg thing. It's really so much more and much deeper than anybody can really imagine if you haven't been in those roles. I had the privilege of, like I said, working with many great special ed teachers and in the administrative role, reading through the IEPs to make sure you know what the accommodations are and what the kids' needs are and how they are progressing, test scores, all those things that we have to really know as we're meeting with those parents so we can talk intelligently about the kid. Luckily, in most of the schools that I've been in, the schools have been small and I've been able to really focus and know those kids pretty well, even if they weren't in my classroom. But as a teacher, when you're called into those meetings to support or share your 2 cents about what the student is doing in that class, it makes it a lot easier because you do know that child and you know how they're acting and reacting to the different pieces of curriculum. But what I want to make sure we understand is that with all that great work the special education's teachers are doing, and also the regular ed teachers that are supporting the process, the system in and of itself does not allow for a lot of change and a lot of different accommodations and modifications to be made just because of how schedules are set up and how the times of day are set up and all those things that we're all locked into one way or another. So this is not a critique of how teachers do, but how the system works. And within that system, the special education teachers do a really good job of finding how to fit those kids into the best system possible to make their experience a positive one. So those limited options really are doing that full inclusive classroom where you have uh, special ed students, typical students, gifted kids, all in the same class, and fully inclusive into the curriculum and doing things that everybody else is doing. You have those programs where you can pull those kids out and work with them one-on-one. You push the teacher in and have them be an additional adult in the room. You could have some other resource room accommodations. Um, those are all typical things that can be done in programming, and they are done. And we're trying to find what works best. I believe in that middle school model, especially the inclusive program is by far the most beneficial for the growth of their personal and social emotional growth. So I think that's something that I would like to focus on. But also, when you start looking at what these kids need, and going back to the title of the topic, the individualized piece of the programming is very limited by the structures of the schools. So if I know that there's a kid that has a certain disability label, I could almost guarantee I can pull out the majority of the accommodations and modifications that the teachers are going to make them successful in class. So, the thing is, when you think of those things that we can do as teachers, we talk about doing small groups, doing extended time, less problems, having a human reader, potential preferential seating, having a scribe maybe. Those are pretty universal across the IEP spectrum. When you talk about a kid that has ADHD, for instance, or has vision issues, or has a learning disability that is, um, it's geared so they have difficulty comprehension and difficult comprehending reading. Those types of things can and will be accommodated with having more time for that student, putting in small groups, working one-on-one with an adult. Those are basically what we're limited to. And that's unfortunate because when you have an administrator who's not as versed in special education law and requirements and all those things that I should be, or all teachers should be, and I can tell you what the accommodations and modifications will be just based on what I already know about them. Something's wrong. That's not individualized. That's a canned program. And again, that's not our teacher's fault. That's how the system is worked. That's how we have resources available to everybody. But what I want to start thinking about, how can we put that I back in IEP? And one of the things I want everybody to consider is if you have a student that is extremely active and has trouble focusing, and you're constantly reminding them that they had to get back to their seat or whatever that may be. If we have a structure where we have gym class once a semester every other day, or even just once a semester, and then you go to health and you don't have physical activity and you don't have recess, if it's a middle school, then when is that kid actually going to release that energy? And so, to have a kid have a second gym class, or have gym happen year round, or even to have gym twice a day, or something that that kid could do to burn some energy. The research says that that's definitely something that could help all kids, not just a kid. When you have a child that struggles in math, oftentimes we reduce the number of problems they have to do. And that's a concern. If you really think about what the idea of giving practice problems is, it's not to learn the concept, it's to reinforce the concept. So if the kid is struggling with that, what they need is not less problems, but better support from an adult to help them work through those issues. Obviously, that's much more difficult to do. So when you're starting to think about those different types of accommodations, if a kid truly needs practice, less isn't better. We need to make sure that we're giving the proper amount, and I don't even want to say more, but the proper amount to help them reinforce their skills. It really is a change of mindset. If a kid has a very difficult time reading, then they need more supports to learn how to read. And it's not just read less or read at a lower level for independent reading. It is about getting the proper support, which is what our special education teachers do. But sometimes in the context of a teacher pushing into a classroom, it may not be as convenient to teach them how to read versus trying to figure out what the content is. And that's where that catch comes in. How do we teach kids to read effectively independently and keep them up with grade level content if they're behind on grade level? So that's where that individualized piece comes in. Maybe there are some things that we can do, and I gave a few examples already, but it does come down to how our structure is happening, the number of adults that can help that student on a daily basis. the schedule that the kids are tied into, the requirements of state having certain core classes over time and being tested on those. Those are all different things that really can't be universally done, because that takes away the IEP again. It takes away the individual piece of that. So when we start talking about these programs, some of the things that I've seen are great hands-on programs that help with more of the life skill piece and basically backdooring the skill into this concept of being prepared for life. I'd rather have us focus on communication skills, civic engagement, collaboration, critical thinking, those types of things, ethics, all those things that really are needed for their future. And if we can teach those skills, I think it would be great to move in that direction and get that eye back in IEP to find out what the kids really need and supporting them and teaching them the skills as we go. So that's my piece for tonight. I see I have an actual live viewer tonight, which is probably one of the first times I've done that, and they give me a thumbs up. I hope that it was entertaining for you. What I'm looking for in the future, I will be doing another positive piece for teachers the next week. I won't give the details away yet. You'll see it on my post on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. You can follow me on any one of those. I'll be looking for guests also that I might be able to do an interview with, and that will be something that I'm looking for down the road. So if you know somebody in education that might be interested or interesting to listen to, other than seeing me all the time, that would be great. I'm also looking for a little support in making this a little bit more professional. If you get a chance to see Steve Madewell set up when he does internet live shows, he is top notch. And maybe I just need to go to him and find out what we're doing wrong. But I noticed when looking back at these that my production value is low, and that's fine right now. But I'm looking for that extra help to get this a little bit more professional, and obviously any guest that could come out. So as always, be kind, be professional, find solutions, and I'll see you here again next week, and I'll have Steve Madewell play us out. Thanks, Victor. That's appreciated. I'm glad you were on the call tonight.
Well, a week never seemed like a long time before, as the minutes string on through the day. It's not like I'd